Welcome to Red Rock Church Online. So thrilled to have you with us today. My name is Petey Kinder. I'm the lead pastor here. And if I've not gotten the chance to meet you yet, we are incredibly excited to see you in person when we have our big grand reopening here in just a few weeks on August 9th. We're going to have our grand reopening of our in-person gatherings, and you don't want to miss it. So mark your calendars. August 9th, August 9th, August 9th. Be there. It's going to be incredible. Now, before we jump into our service today, I want to give you a little bit of a heads up as to something that's going to be a little different starting next Sunday. Okay, starting next Sunday, we're going to transition to having Church Online being pre-recorded as it's been for the past few months. So we're actually going to start live streaming Church Online from our auditorium here at Red Rock Church into your living rooms, into your homes, wherever you're watching this from. Okay, so now, for most of you, that's not a huge change, but the big change you need to prepare for is that starting next Sunday, you won't be able to watch church online on demand whenever you want to watch it on Sundays. On Sundays, you'll need to tune in with us through our website or through Facebook or YouTube at one of our service times, 9 a.m., 10:30 a.m., or 5 p.m. on Sunday nights, and you'll be able to catch the service right there, and then it'll be on demand starting the following day. So just note that little change starting next week as we kind of ramp up and get ready for broadcasting our services online, live stream going forward, all right? Now today, we got a really special treat for you, all right? Last week we talked about giving and how we should give to the mission, and we mentioned several of the local organizations that we partner with for initiative giving, for giving that helps meet tangible needs. And today, I'm excited to announce to you that we as Red Rock have begun a partnership with a great ministry here that's based here in Colorado Springs called Exodus Road Ministries. And Exodus Road Ministries fights human trafficking all across the world. And today, we're gonna get the chance to hear from their founder, their CEO, their leader, Matt Parker. And I cannot wait for you to hear this message that he's gonna bring about the incredible ministry that they do. And we're so honored that we get to help partner with them so that when you give financially here at Red Rock, part of that goes to fund places like Exodus Road Ministries. And so I'm so excited for you to hear from Matt today. So lean in, listen, and learn, and see the heart of God in this ministry that's fighting something that's happening all across the world. But right now, we're going to do what we do every single week. We're going to tell Jesus how thankful we are for him. We're going to tell him how much we love him and how much he's changed our lives. And so you need to know, if it's your first time with us, Jesus has completely changed us. And it's so much that we can't help but sing to him every single week. And so we invite you to listen to these lyrics that tell the story of God's love for you. And if you're a follower of Jesus out there, man, stand up in your living rooms, stand up in your homes, and let's sing to Jesus today.
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. That empty praise, treasures of faith, never enough. Then you came along, and you put me back together. And every desire is now satisfied. Here in your love, there's nothing better. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing, oh, nothing is better than you. show you my weakness, failures and flaws. Lord, you see me more, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is God of the valley, and there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. No, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing is better than you. We declare, God, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. Sing that again. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Lord, there's nothing that's better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing, oh, nothing is better than you. Lord, there's nothing better than you. There's not, we sing it out, that's better than you. There's nothing is better than you. You turn graves, you turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. Sing it. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who walking around these walls. I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. And waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won. For you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Yeah. You never fail. I know the night won't last. Your word will come to pass. And my heart will sing your praise again. Sing Jesus. Oh Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. Oh, my heart will sing your praise again. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. If this is my confidence, you never fail. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. And this is my confidence. You never fail. You never fail me, God. Oh, and you won't stop now. You never fail me. I've seen you move. You move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way where there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. I've seen you move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way where there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. I've seen you move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way where there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. I'll see you do it again. Sing this out. Your promise still stands, and great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. Oh, this is my confidence. You never fail. That's right. Your promise still stands. Oh, great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. beyond my failure. There is a still voice to silence all my fears. Even the worst of my mistakes are miracles in the making. Are miracles in the making. By your stripes I am healed. With one touch I am made whole. You have spoken, and I know that it is so. In the storm, you are peace, and your love won't let me go. You have spoken, and I know that it is so. In every season, your purpose is unchanging. In every moment, you're working for my good. Jesus, the rock that never fails. Your kingdom will not be shaken. Your kingdom will not be shaken. By your stripes I am healed. With one touch I am made whole. You have spoken, and I know that it is so. In the storm, you are peace, and your love won't let me go. You have spoken, and I know that it is so. We trust you, we trust you, you're faithful. Your word is settled in heaven, it will be done. Father, let it be done. Yours is the kingdom forever, your will be done. Let it be done. Your word is settled in heaven, it will be done. Father, let it be done. Yours is the kingdom forever, your will be done. And let it be done. Your word is settled in heaven, it will be done. Father, let it be done. Yours is the kingdom forever, your will be done. And let it be By your stripes I am healed. With one touch I am made whole. You have spoken, and I know that it is so. In the storm, you are peace, and your love won't let me go. You have spoken, and I know that it is so. You not spoken, and I know that it is so.
Hey everybody at Red Rocks Community, my name is Matt Parker. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Exodus Road here in Colorado Springs. And Petey was so kind to hand me the mic virtually during this COVID-19 time to just share with you about our new partnership with your community and what it is that we do here. So we fight human trafficking. And here at the Exodus Road, we have become experts at finding and freeing victims of human trafficking all around the world. A little of our Genesis story. We started in Southeast Asia. I was a youth pastor up in Woodland Park, and my family and I moved to Thailand to run a children's home. I have, for a long time now, just had a deep heart and passion for the global poor. And as you guys can imagine, in youth ministry, I used to drag my students all around the world doing all the things that youth pastors do. We painted fences, loved on orphans. And that experience for me up in Woodland Park just sparked this passion for the global poor. And I wanted to make a real difference. And in 2009, I got an opportunity to move my family to Thailand and run a children's home. And it just felt for me at the time like this perfect transition from youth ministry to full-time missionary. And we raised support as missionaries do, and we headed off and ended up in a little town called Doi Saket, which is just north of Chiang Mai, Thailand, and running this children's home. We had 48 young girls in our home from the border regions of Burma or Myanmar, from various tribal groups, minority groups. And, honestly, I didn't know anything about human trafficking. And you might kind of be there today, sitting in your seat, wherever you are at your house, watching this online. But human trafficking is the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of exploitation. And that can look like so many different things. I think for most people, as I describe it, they probably think of kidnapping a child. But most often, it looks like a trafficker or a business owner exploiting marginalized people for profit. And so that would look like offering a job to someone who's desperate for work. You get them in a vehicle or on a bus, and then they arrive at the destination where the promised job was supposed to be. And then it's revealed to them that there is no job actually. And they're going to have to do prostitution or some type of forced labor and not be paid what was promised, if anything at all. So that's human trafficking, one version of it. Human trafficking can happen locally here in Colorado Springs. It can happen, there's 18 major metropolitan cities here in the United States. All of them suffer from amounts of trafficking. But I found myself in northern Thailand. And as I started to learn that this was happening, I grew really concerned because I had this children's home of 48 beautiful young girls in it, and I was worried that maybe perhaps some of them were suffering from some form of exploitation. So as I began to hear about trafficking from the community, there was a few rumors that I would hear about. Predominantly, I would hear that brokers or traffickers would go from major cities up into these villages where the girls in my children's home were from and offer false employment and lure these children out from the villages and into the cities for work. But when they got to Bangkok or the major city where the job was supposed to be, they were told they'd have to sleep with customers. And they received very little, if any, compensation. So that's kind of the world I found myself in, from Woodland Park to Southeast Asia, learning about these children that were being exploited for sexual services. It's so horrible and so disruptive. A little more about me. I'm a father. I have 3 kids, beautiful kids. And at the time we were living in Southeast Asia, learning about human trafficking, my kids were 4, 6, and 8 years old. So they were little. And as you can just imagine, a father/youth pastor trying to run this children's home in northern Thailand and learning that children in the community were being bought and sold like this, it was incredibly disruptive to my spirit. And I just felt like it was one of those problems you come across in life you can't turn a blind eye to. I tell people it was like we discovered a certain amount of suffering in the world we couldn't ignore. And so what I did is, I think most people would do this. I hopped in a truck and I drove north to the border of Burma to investigate if this was actually happening or if this was just a fake rumor in the community. And I ended up going to these remote villages. And if you would just imagine with me driving this truck on 4-wheel drive roads for 4 hours into the jungle, and you arrive in the middle of the jungle, these kind of shanty town village communities made up of migrants who had come years and years ago from China and various parts of northern Southeast Asia. They migrated into Thailand, but they were stateless. And so they would set up these makeshift villages/refugee camps, which would eventually become an agricultural center for the north. But these places don't have electricity or cell towers. They're very, very remote. And I interviewed village leaders in these villages to learn about what was happening in their community. And one of the questions I asked them was, hey, this rumor I keep hearing in town about brokers coming to villages like yours and offering employment, but only to the pretty girls. Is that true? Does that really happen? And over a period of 2 or 3 days, I interviewed 4 village leaders in this pretty large border town area, and each of them told me, Matt, that happens all the time. In fact, there's a saying that we have in the village that there are no pretty girls in the village. So that was the first time in 2009 I was exposed to human trafficking, and I didn't know what to do, but I knew something had to be done. If you fast forward a few months, I found myself sitting in a law enforcement officer's desk talking to him about human trafficking, and I was invited to consult with the Thai Royal Police and learn what was happening in the region on human trafficking, border crossings, how recruitment was happening, how much girls and boys could be bought and sold for, where they were being bought and sold. I was learning about what law enforcement was doing to fight human trafficking and why it was failing. Today, in our time, the United Nations International Labor Organization estimates there's 40.8 million modern-day slaves. Today, on our watch, right now, about 40 to 50% of them are sold into sexual slavery, and the rest are sold into some form of labor exploitation, labor trafficking, where they have to work at oil plantations or brick factories, chocolate plantations. These are children, these are men and women, garment factories that are forced into labor situations and then not paid a fair wage, or they're forced into prostitution, not knowingly and willingly, totally against their will. And they're threatened and they're under duress. And this is happening right now. And I began to learn that in Southeast Asia. So I began to work with law enforcement. And we began to map out the region where trafficking was happening, vulnerable communities that were being exploited, and how traffickers would persuade people to get on a bus or a plane or in a car, and what mechanisms they would use to keep them enslaved. And after about a year of doing research, I looked up at the table from the group that was doing this study with me and law enforcement, and it just hit us like a ton of bricks that no one's looking for victims of human trafficking. There's a whole lot of people talking about victims of human trafficking. There's ministries and organizations doing prevention work. There's ministries and organizations doing aftercare. But who's actually looking for victims of trafficking and doing what we call intervention? And my first thought, and I think it's most people's first thought, is, well, hey, that's the job of the police. You call the police and they go, arrest the bad guy and identify what crimes are taking place. But unfortunately, human trafficking is a very hidden crime. It's a difficult crime to prove. And in many cases, law enforcement can be corrupt or complicit in this type of activity. So when we looked up at that table that day and recognized of the 40.8 million modern day slaves today, almost no one's looking for them. It overwhelmed me. 40.8 million is a lot. And I looked at my wife, and we just agreed that, hey, we got 3 kids. And a lot of times what we were learning is these village communities, the moms and the dads, the nuclear family is really this organic protection mechanism for kids. But if you're an impoverished farming community in a farming family, and you had 4 or 5 kids, mouths to feed, and maybe a monsoon had come through and wiped out your rice crop, or perhaps you just were struggling to make ends meet, and then a man shows up in your village and offers your oldest daughter a job in Bangkok or Phnom Penh or a large city. And as a parent, you would kind of feel like, man, we have struck the jackpot. Our kids have been found in this village and they're going to be moved to a city. They're going to make a lot more money. And at first you're like, wait a minute, I'm not that stupid. I would never do that. Well, you would. We do it all the time. We send our kids off to college or to a job somewhere in New York, and we want them to launch from our home. But in this case, a trafficker has deceived the parents and made promises that will never come true. And what the parents in these remote villages and impoverished communities have done, they've inadvertently placed their children in a trafficker's car and doomed them to a life of slavery and sexual abuse. So my wife and I, realizing these things, agreed that we must do something. The world must know about what's happening to its children. And we actually need to stand in the gap for the voiceless, for those who are exploited and locked in back rooms who have no means of escape. So many times when I travel and I speak, people are like, well, why don't victims of human trafficking run away or call 911? Unfortunately, it's pretty easy to put someone in an amount of duress and place them under threat. It's pretty easy to say to a young, vulnerable 16, 15-year-old girl, if you run or if you talk to police, I'm going to go kidnap your sister, or I'll kill your mother, or this girl that's next to you, I'll abuse her. This world, the underworld of human trafficking, is violent. And these girls are only 15, 16 years old, sometimes 14 and 13. Imagine what you were doing when you were 13 and 14 years old. What skills would you have to escape a criminal syndicate? What skills would you have if you were in another country and didn't speak the local language? Or if the environment was full of corrupt law enforcement officers who, if you ran and escaped, they would collect you and bring you back, and then you would suffer unimaginable abuse. This is the environment that the children of the world, the 40.8 million modern day slaves, are trying to navigate with almost no skills, no technology, no means to escape. So we began to learn these things. And in 2010, I got the very first phone call from a partner organization in Thailand calling me to say, Matt, we know you work with police doing some research on human trafficking. We have a case, we think, of suspicious activity. A brothel is that we know about has photos of children on the back wall. And it seems that that's not normal, and we're worried for these kids that they're actually for sale. So I took this intelligence to law enforcement, the partners that I was working with. I was working with Sergeant Colonel of Region 5 on human trafficking. And I just shared with him the information. And he said, Matt, look, this is a compelling case, but you have the information third hand. We don't really have any evidence. It would cost money to mobilize law enforcement to do this case. But if just you could have somebody go verify the intelligence, we'll do it. We'll mobilize and we'll rescue those girls. But can you find somebody to go? Because our budgets are small. And so I hopped on a plane and I went undercover. And I'll share this with you guys. That first undercover experience was in Pad Pong, the oldest and largest red light district in Bangkok. And I was unprepared. To get there, you're on this major highway, and then you turn left down an alley, and it's lit up with neon lights, and there's just men and women everywhere selling all kinds of things. Drugs are being sold. Men and women, boys and girls are being sold. Child pornography is being sold. And you have pimps and traffickers approaching you and showing you pornography. And it's just this overwhelming experience. And I remember this feeling of just shrinking in on myself. And people were grabbing you, and I didn't want them to touch me. It felt like a dirty environment. And God grabbed me. And I had an experience on that dark red light alley. And I heard God say to my spirit, Matt, you are the only man, you and your friends, you're the only men here not to purchase sex. Right now, you get to be my hands and my feet. Those eyes of yours, they're my eyes. Love these people. And all of a sudden, that feeling of collapsing in on myself, it dissipated. And it's like a veil was lifted and that dark alley lit up. And I began to see all these people as God's beloved. And so people would pull on me, I'd wrap my arm around them, and I'd talk to them like humans. And they didn't know it, but I was praying for them. Everything they offered me, I'd be like, hey, thanks so much, but not tonight. And we began to navigate this environment. I went in to the Target brothel. I sat down with a girl named Belle who wore a number on her chest. And all the girls and boys wear numbers because most of the customers don't speak Thai. All you have to do is choose the number of the girl or boy you want to have sex with. And for $45, you can buy them for an hour and a half. You don't have to be able to communicate with them. And what blew my mind was how much, we talk in the human trafficking space about the commoditization of people. We make people a product to buy, like canned goods on a shelf. And that's exactly what these girls were. You just picked one and you took them upstairs to do whatever you wanted to. And it was overwhelming. But I sat down next to Belle, and I spoke a little Thai at this point, and my friends were fluent Thai speakers, and we were able to interview Belle and several girls in that brothel, and they all had the same story. I was tricked into coming here. I was offered a job that didn't exist. And when I got here, they said I owed money for my transportation. I didn't have it. They wouldn't feed me. They forced me to dance and go with customers to pay off my debt. And Belle told me, I don't know how to get home. I'm desperate to go home. My parents have no idea what I'm doing here. I flew back to Chiang Mai and met with law enforcement, and we delivered what we now call a target package, intelligence of what we'd seen and how much girls cost and where the girls were from and the other clients in the brothel, all this intelligence. We put it in a report and we gave it to police. And the sergeant colonel looked up at me and his eyes were huge. He says, Matt, we've never had this kind of intelligence come out of a brothel. Because you see, Matt, we're Thai. And they suspect that we're law enforcement, but they would never suspect that you work for the police. Thank you so much. So I took my wife out and my 3 kids to a coffee shop to debrief this first experience, and my kids are playing in the stream. And I start to share with my wife everything that we'd seen and the story of Belle. And I told her the worst part of this mission wasn't pretending to be a John and having a beer and talking to a brothel owner. I love people. It's easy to talk to people. The hardest part was leaving Belle in the brothel to hopefully mobilize police to come back for her. So I went to speak with the sergeant colonel about whether or not I could go undercover for him again. And guys, listen, I was sure he was going to tell me, he was going to turn me down. He was going to laugh me out of the room because I'm not anything that special. I'm not a ninja or Liam Neeson or Jason Bourne. I'm not a military guy. I'm a youth pastor. But I walked into the sergeant colonel's office and I said, listen, would it be helpful if I went undercover more? Would it help you? And then he said something that would change my life forever. He said, Matt, everybody loves to talk about human trafficking, but no one wants to do what you just asked me. He says, I have no help, and I would love your help. So he deputized me into the Thai Royal Police, and I began to go undercover on weekends, looking for children in the community being sold. And I began to find them. And the danger started to grow, but I kept finding kids. And I would write my field reports, and law enforcement were thrilled. They were thrilled. And then we started to rescue kids. Around that time, I was contacted by a group of retired Special Forces operatives living in that community who were fighting trafficking, and they had heard about my relationship with law enforcement, which is the thing that they didn't have. And we started to band together, and I would teach them all the best practices I'd learned, and they'd bring their military expertise to bear as well. With law enforcement, we created a best practice manual. How is it that you go undercover, control the environment, not victimize the victim, but gather intelligence for their freedom? We began to do that. And Laura and I at that point kind of looked at each other and we said, look, this ministry is starting to take off. I think we have something here. It's important. We started to see kids be rescued from law enforcement based on our intelligence. And in the first year, we rescued around 30 kids. It blew our minds. To be honest, we weren't sure that we could rescue one kid. And the fact that we were able to impact the freedom of 30 was just overwhelming to us. We looked at each other and feeling like this is where God was leading us. I remember one day over coffee just saying, Laura, I think we need to start a nonprofit organization, because it's not enough for me, Matt Parker, to just be a sole investigator, even to have a small team of investigators and rescue one or two or three at a time. Let's build a machine that systematically identifies victims of trafficking and enters into this process of freedom where we deliver intelligence to police, we bring technology and training, we make law enforcement as good as they can be. Let's build an organization and let's call it the Exodus Road. And so as we began to rescue kids, we formed the nonprofit, the Exodus Road, and we made it based here in Colorado Springs, where we had some friends and some contacts. And we started to expand into India and now Latin America. And here in the United States, we're operating over the last 10 years. Guys, we, by God's grace, have impacted the freedom of 1,500 men, women, boys, and girls. And really, more importantly, we've influenced the arrest of over 600 pedophiles and traffickers in the 4 countries we operate. I never in a million years would have thought we could impact that volume. And it was scary and risky. And I look back on those decisions of faith, and I'm deeply grateful. Petey wanted me to share with you guys a little bit about why I think God cares about this. You know, we're our mission and the mission of Red Rock, we're partnering together, and I'm so thankful for this partnership. But what I want to share with you guys is why in the world would Jesus send anybody into a brothel? And if you want to look it up with me, I want to take you to a bit of scripture. I'm not going to go super crazy pastor on you guys, but you guys can open to Matthew 16. There's this moment with Jesus and his disciples in this chapter where they arrive into an area called Caesarea Philippi. And if you guys aren't familiar, Caesarea Philippi was kind of like the brothel of Jesus's day. Why is that? Well, there's a few unique things about Caesarea Philippi. It's the mouth of the Jordan River. The Jordan River flows out of this kind of rock. That's the mouth of the Jordan. And that's where Jesus kind of pulls up with the disciples. He's got Peter and his guys there. But right next to the mouth of the Jordan is a cave. And at that cave, in this time, in this part of history, in Matthew 16, they used to worship the god of the underworld, Pan. Also later, Baal or Baal. I've heard all three pronunciations over my career as a pastor. So this was kind of a no-go for Israelites, for Jews. You didn't go to this pagan area, super pagan. In fact, it was so pagan that at the mouth of this cave, in worshiping Pan, the god of the underworld, they would have orgies and all kinds of sex acts to really gain the pleasure of Pan. It was a fertility practice to kind of allow yourself to have babies, and it was supposed to bring you good fortune. But it was super pagan. And like the fact that Jesus was even there as a rabbi, let alone his disciples, was a huge no-no. All the rabbis would stay away from Caesarea Philippi for that reason. So it's no mistake that Jesus shows up on the scene with his disciples at the mouth of the Jordan River. And he asks his disciples this question you guys are all familiar with. Who do you say that I am? Do you remember this? Who do you say that I am? And the disciples kind of take turns arguing, as they like to do. Some say you're Elijah, some say you're the prophet. And then Simon speaks up and says, you're the Son of Man. You're the Son of God. And Jesus looks at Simon and says, blessed are you, Simon, for God in heaven has given you this. I now call you Rock, Peter. I now name you Peter. And upon this rock, I will build my church. And the context here, if you do any hermeneutic studies on Matthew chapter 16, it's interesting because for a long time, especially in Catholic tradition, they looked at this moment in Scripture, and the thought was, Peter. Peter's special. The church is going to be built on Peter and this testimony. But when you look at the context, the mouth of the Jordan River, Caesarea Philippi, this place that they shouldn't even have been in, the brothel. And you got this cave that you can see where they were standing. They would have been able to see this platform and this worship to Pan and this very highly sexualized environment where these acts had taken place. And Jesus is saying, upon this rock, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. In this time period, that cave had a nickname. That cave to the underworld where Pan was supposed to live, they called it the gates of hell. And Jesus is referencing that if you do that study. So Jesus is saying right here, in the midst of this pagan environment, I will build my church. Not where it's safe, not where our church is nice and big and has big, thick doors to shut and we keep the evil out and we're all pure on the inside. It's this idea of those gates are not going to prevail over the gospel. I don't know about you guys, but when I hear that story, it just resonates in my spirit that the men and women who follow Jesus, we are a part of God's solution for the suffering of the poor. But we cannot be that healer if we're not willing to risk the dark. I think God cares very, very much. Not just for kids, but for us, not just at Red Rock Church, but for humanity. And we get this mandate to come and follow Jesus. We get this commission to bring forth into the darkest corners the message of the gospel. And again, that message of the gospel isn't how to get to heaven. It's the story that God so loved the world, he sent his only son from heaven to the brothel of earth to rescue a prostitute like me. To risk dirt, to risk death and blood and suffering. Why? For the freedom of us. That is the gospel. That is the good news. And we are image bearers. So this partnership that we have with Red Rock, it's unique, guys. Everyone at Red Rock is not qualified, nor should they deploy with the Exodus Roads Delta team and go undercover into brothels. It's challenging, it's dangerous, and it's difficult. It's not for everybody. But everyone has a role to play in the gospel. Everyone has 5 loaves and 2 fish to lay at the altar. It's this unbelievably insufficient amount. And here at the Exodus Road, I just have 5 loaves and 2 fish. But the thing about that miracle is that God took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, he broke it, he blessed it, and he fed the 5,000. We just have to bring what we have. That's what we're doing here at the Exodus Road. 40.8 million modern day slaves is overwhelming, and we are not going to rescue all of those people. Honestly, we sit and hold hands of a lot of young boys and girls that we will never actually be able to rescue. But we've rescued 1,500 of them. And tomorrow there's another one that's going to need our help. And together at Red Rock, we can make that happen. And we can do that in a way that's honoring to the Lord and honoring to the gospel. So as I kind of wrap up my message here about who the Exodus Road is and this new partnership we have with Red Rock, I want to just pull out a stone. These are so important to us here at the Exodus Road. In the Old Testament, in the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, there's a moment where the Israelites, really the ancient Hebrews, are coming out of this amazing battle that they'd had, impossible odds. You guys know the Old Testament. And God showed up in miraculous ways. And the Israelites weren't defeated. And Samuel, in his wisdom, he decided to set up an Ebenezer stone up on a hill, which is a stone of remembrance, basically a monument. And he set that stone up so the Israelites would look up on that stone and remember God's faithfulness, especially when they get discouraged. So at the very beginning of forming the Exodus Road, when I was still going undercover, before we'd grown very large, I suffered a lot of trauma and a lot of discouragement. And I hijacked that story out of Samuel, and we started to collect these river stones, kind of like Ebenezer stones, these monuments. And we did that because we knew that 40.8 million was overwhelming and discouraging. And we really do a lot more, the amount of kids that we're able to recover versus the amount of kids that need recovering it's discouraging. So we decided to write, every time we could affect the freedom of somebody, we would write their names on a rock, the location and date of the rescue mission we conducted to free them, and then the name of the investigation team that had the honor of being a part of their freedom journey. And we started to collect these stones just to have around to encourage us. And what's remarkable is we didn't know it at the time, that someday we'd have 1,500 stones all around our office, symbolizing the freedom of a child that otherwise would be doomed to slavery. And so here at the Exodus Road, we have a lot of these around our office, and we also keep on our desk a stone that's blank because we can go get one more, just one more. And we talk a lot about numbers, and it's important to have metrics and measures to your programs, and we do that. But my daughter is worth every dollar in the world if she was enslaved and needed freedom. And so we keep this one rock, the blank rock, on our desk to remind us, look, just one more. We can get one more. Guys, I want to thank you for your partnership. I thank you for listening to the story of the Exodus Road. We're here fighting hard to rescue about 250, 300 victims of trafficking a year. Thank you for making that possible.
Well, man, what an incredible message from Matt today. So thankful for him and thankful for the work that they're doing all across the world. And we're grateful that we get to partner with them in fighting human trafficking together. If you need anything, if you have a question, or you need somebody to pray with, you can stop by the info bar through our website, redrockchurch.org, and there's someone that's waiting to talk with you right now over Zoom. If you want to take a next step, if you want to jump on a serving team, or if you want to get connected to a group, or you want to start giving, go to our website and click on the Next Steps link, and that'll have everything you need to take your next step here in following Jesus fearlessly. We love you guys so much. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you guys next Sunday.